So the best reflection of Babylonian society that we have archaeologically is the Code of Hammurabi. Now, most of you are probably familiar with this. You've read about it in high school or saw it on the History Channel or something like that. And I want to talk about this not because it represents some kind of transformational aspect of legal jurisprudence or as a foundation of Western society, but rather as it reflects the needs of bureaucratic administration of all these regionally appointed judges to ensure the proper functioning of the empire. So this is found on multiple cuneiform tablets that would have been locally available for local magistrates, but the most famous example is a 2¼ meter tall diorite stele that's found in the city of Susa. We know that the kings of Susa sacked Babylon and brought this back as booties, as spoils of war, where it was recovered in the French excavations in the early 20th century. And what we can see on this is Hammurabi here, depicted in the traditional kingly garb, receiving the law code from Shamash, the Babylonian god of truth and justice. And so this stele itself is written into kind of three parts. There's the prologue, which basically outlines Hammurabi's divine purpose, that the gods have chosen him to bring justice to the land. And then there are, in the middle, 282 laws and the subsequent punishments for breaking them. Each law is written as, if this happens, then this punishment will take place. But the important part to remember here is that punishments vary between social classes. The three social classes: property owners, free people, and slaves. And then they also vary based on gender. And the punishments that we generally see here are not punishments in the kind of legal sense of something like establishing a jail, but rather as physical punishment. In fact, the most common punishment administered in the Law Code of Hammurabi is death. This is where we kind of see the idea of an eye for an eye type of punishment. But there's also some substantial financial restitution, especially when we're talking about things like livestock or slaves, things that could be bought and sold. Now, this is also kind of important to keep in mind that this is part of a long-standing tradition of Mesopotamian legal codes that date back to the Ur-3 period, about 600 years before this. So we can kind of look at this with the Code of Ur-Nammu being the first of these at about 2000 BCE that we see in Mesopotamian tradition. So Hammurabi doesn't invent the wheel. He doesn't invent the legal system as it's kind of taught through this. But rather what he does is he takes all of these legal precedences and applies them in one place. So judges within the Babylonian Empire have a clear understanding of how to handle cases that come before their courts. So I want to take a couple minutes here to kind of point out a couple of these laws that kind of point out the divisions in Babylonian society. So Law 6, if anyone steals property from a temple or of the court, right, that is the state, he shall be put to death. And anyone who buys that property as well should be put to death. Right, so this is kind of theft here, especially of state and religious artifacts and food and materials, is punishable by death. And this kind of points to the primacy of the state. So if anyone steals the minor son of another, he shall be put to death. So kidnapping here, punishable by death. But it's important to look here, minor son. Right, so this kind of points to the patriarchal divisions in society. There's no mentions of kidnappings in the law code for daughters. If someone can take a daughter and there's no punishable action by the code, but a son, because he will inherit property from the upper classes, is important. So 15, if one takes a male or female slave of the court or a male female slave of a freeman outside the city gates, he shall be put to death. And then 16 is related. If anyone receives into his house a runaway, a male or female slave of the court or a free man, and does not bring it to the public proclamation, the master of the house shall be put to death. So what this kind of points to is that anyone who steals a slave, right, can be put to death. And anyone who houses a runaway slave can be put to death. And this points to the importance here of maintaining the institution of slavery in the state's ideas. So Law 117 basically says if you're in debt, you can sell yourself, your wife, your son, or your daughter for money into forced labor. That is, you can sell them as labor for 3 years. So in a way to kind of pay your debts, you can sell the rest of your household, your wife, your son, your daughter, for this, or yourself. And so what it kind of points to is the head of the household, the importance, the primacy of that patriarchal position. 129 is talking about adultery. If a wife's man be surprised with another man, that they catch them in the act, both the man and the woman, the adulterers, will be tossed into the river. All right, they're thrown into the water. So the husband here can pardon his wife, and the king his slaves. That means you can pardon the wife and then take the slaves of the other man as reparations for him sleeping with your wife. And 175, if a state slave or slave of a free man marry the daughter of a free man, and children are born, the master of the slave shall have no right to enslave the children of the free. So basically what this says is that if one of the couple is free and they have a child, the child isn't automatically a slave because one of their parents were a slave. So we can see here the importance of maintaining those distinctions between the enslaved and free populations. 187, if the son of a paramour in the palace service or a prostitute cannot be demanded back, that essentially says that concubines and prostitutes have no right to their children. And then 196 through 199 and 229 through 231 deal with the same kind of issue. So 196, if a man put out an eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. Now this is between property holders. So if a property holder puts out an eye of another man, right, that his eye will be forfeit. If he breaks another man's bone, you'll break his bone. So if he breaks his arm, you break your arm in return. But if he puts out the eye of a free man, or breaks the bone of a freed man, he shall pay 1 piece of gold. So a free man doesn't have status to claim direct retribution against a property owner. And if he puts out the eye of a man's slave, or breaks the bone of a man's slave, he shall pay 1/2 of the slave's value. So slaves are worth even less than free men in this kind of institution. You can see that codified again here in the Builder's Code. If builders build a house and it falls down and it kills the owner, then the builder should be put to death. So if a free man, or if a property owner dies in his house because the house was poor construction, then the builder of that house will be sentenced to death. If it kills the son of the owner, then the builder's son shall be put to death, even though the builder's son had nothing to do with this, although oftentimes may have been an apprentice in his construction. And then if it kills a slave, then the builder only has to pay the owner back for the slave. Right? So we can kind of look at this as this kind of social divisions. The Code of Hammurabi here codifies the class distinctions in society, rather than kind of creating an equal law, equality under the law. What it does is it creates an equality of class and maintains those divisions within Mesopotamian society. And the largest proportion of laws have to do with how to treat slaves. So you can see the vested interest in the state in maintaining that system of slavery.